process.
Isn't that?
But is that Jason?
That's
saying?
Jason.
Well, he didn't say that.
Oh, right.
Well, he sort of did, but he sort of didn't when I went to it.
Okay.
But
Well,
then
that's
right,
good.
but that's Jason.
Yeah.
But there's this, I want to claim that I'm moved by my value of loving kindness.
Yes, that's him.
Well, that wasn't, loving kindness
No, it's
wasn't mentioned at all.
No, I agree. It's no.
So in terms of the criteria set
Yeah.
up, so I couldn't work out whether this was you speaking or him speaking. And
No, that's him because it's in Italian.
well, that's what I assumed,
Yeah.
but there was zero mention of it.
Right.
In loving kindness, I watched the
Yeah.
video from beginning to end, and
Oh,
it wasn't
yeah.
mentioned once.
So no, I agree. That's
What's it
what's
showing?
it's wrong.
Have you been working
You know,
really hard on these?
you can't do it.
I was training
What?
From Jason, you can't justify his claim to a living kindness from the evidence is presented. But
Right,
can we
that's
come back-
right,
Can we right?
No, that's right, that's right, no, I'm
Right.
really...
Right. Well, do you want to just say that? Because it's important, Rachel.
What?
It's wonderful, wonderful. That was your bus, go on.
Jack confused you.
Yes, just for a bit, yeah.
No, it isn't, it's to actually
Right.
start to begin
Make my days.
saying how I
I'm not gonna be
understand
out and just admit.
attraction and fusion differently from you.
Okay.
Right, so that's how, what
there.
part of life was, and that means why I was confused by what I just said.
Yeah, no, but he doesn't offer us real evidence to justify his claim at all. You know, it's yes, all right? What? Yes, yeah. I will.
Need to see what you came up
Right. Yes, Julie. Do you want to go?
In the
way hang on.
We've got to minister to all in a minute. All in a room,
Oh, right, yes,
Let's feed him.
The mail is just passing it on.
Yeah, that's right, yes. Always a bloke you won't be able to manage this.
That's right. Yeah.
Can you pass the milk over, please, Robyn?
Sure, emotional empathy.
That's
Not
the
on.
ticket.
Do you know what? Somebody said to me that day, they needed to check out the difference between empathy and sympathy.
Yeah.
Whether there's that different, yeah.
In the dictionary. Sorry, there's a...
They say,
Well,
No,
the
I'm not
empathy
going
is
there, but carry on.
not where it comes in between them. Yeah, that's for sympathy, isn't it?
Sorry, sorry.
But that's genuinely talking about that from an embodied expression, you see.
Ah.
I believe.
God.
Right.
Right?
Just carry on as
Oh,
if
no.
we're normal now.
We can try. Sure, do you want to pass by, Sonia? You've got a mouthful or not? Are you all right?
So I'll pass it by.
Yes.
so, yeah, what's my buzz? My buzz is that I'm spending lots of time on trains over the next week, which is very good because I like trains, I can write on trains, lots of focus on trains. So I've been, still, this is the other book that I got, which is by Susan Gordon, Patricia Bennett and then Nell Noddings, about caregiving. They're American, so that's the word for carer. So I had just been starting to grapple with why anything that I'm saying would be original, but I think Jack's just helped me with that because it's not about the words, it's about the kind of lived experience. So that's been good. And I've been still really love the fact that I can listen to books while I'm getting on with other stuff. It's really good. So I've been listening to a lot of leadership stuff because next week I'm going up to Cumbria for a leadership course because it's sort of part of the PhD. Well, I can do it because I'm a PhD student, which is nice. And I'm looking forward to that, partly because there's a guy on Sunday Skype called Jason who I haven't actually met in real life, but he's going. It's always nice to meet someone that you've been talking to on Skype in real life. Partly because it's beautiful, the Lake District is just stunning, so it's such a nice place to kind of try and gather your thoughts. And it's always good just to have some consolidated time to think with other people, which I'm better at doing when I think with other people than just think on my own. How does?
I've got two, well, it's one, but it's two little things to make one buzz. I discovered a track by Hugh Laurie, which is a cover version of Lead Belly, which, when I listen to it, it just completely encapsulates my youth. But that's the music, but the lyrics encapsulate where I am now. It's amazing, it's just incredible. So I'm finding that very uplifting. It's by Lead Belly and it's called You Don't Know My Mind. And I was rooting around in a charity shop in Glastonbury and
Great.
came across
This version of it, much better than a new one.
95p by Eric Fromm, which is really engaging at the moment, and particularly the comment he makes about equality, where there's a big search for sameness, and that's got lost is people are looking for oneness. And I sort of thought about this current culture of transgender, and I wondered if that's because men and women are becoming the same, and people are then looking for something different to be, or to merge them. Because sex actually demands differentiation, you have to be different to survive.
Sort of a release from yesterday, because I sort of feel I've been juggling all sorts of creative things in my current theme about purposeful creativity. I've been had lots and lots of projects on, and they've all come to a sort of a point where they're sort of finished. And this is the one that I put online last night, and it was not finished, obviously, it's a process, but it's kind of, I hadn't realised how clearing it is when you, like, I sent off the thing I've been making for my granddaughter, the other granddaughter's things, sort of, their birthdays, and my son's games now reaching a point where he could put it to one side for a bit, and then these two things, the paper and this website, are now sort of, so I'm feeling quite good, feeling like it's, I can stop dashing around like a mad thing. You know that feeling when you're, oh God, yeah, and actually you just have to get on and do it. Anyway, this is, we did put this, created this 2 years ago, in 2017, a website for the Adarian Skype group, so that we could all put together our stuff for the conference. This all arises out of, I'm only going to call it nagging. No, I shouldn't call that encouragement. And I'm not even going to say who they are because they've got grins on their faces. But because of their encouragement, you just don't have to push you on a bit and make you raise your game. I think that really interesting. Yeah, and so 2019, we're doing another one. This Joy Mounter, who you may or may not know, who's the educationalist who's invented spirals, and then there's a spiral section there where we're introducing, it's only just beginning, there should be more things to put in there, and I've produced a paper, sort of because of it, but I wanted to do it anyway, so actually spirals doesn't have a lot to do with it, if I'm honest, but I
Where is it? Where's the paper?
if you click on spirals, the paper isn't up yet.
Oh, right,
Yeah,
okay.
but if you
Alright.
click on spirals, you'll see what I've done to make it.
Okay.
So as you scroll down,
Yeah. Is that it?
yeah, those are the sort of visual
Oh, I see.
headings,
Yeah, yeah.
and I've just written what I did. That way, I'm fulfilling my promise that I would write and it's not there yet, I haven't put it
No.
up yet, that I would write a paper using spirals. So there I'm saying how I used it.
That's great.
What is it?
Spirals. It's Joy's model. Thank you for that. That's quite helpful. Yes, of a mixture of living theory and task, and it's what she designed and living theory task. It's what she designed for school children, 6-7-year-olds. And she then went on to use it for people of all ages. So it's an inquiry method which is How can we?
I say what TASK stands for, thinking actively in social context.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And it's a kind of a wheel of a process of action research. So
You
kind
can call
of
it up if you like.
In what?
gathering
Spirals,
and
spirals.
gathering and
Oh, sorry, should I say
sorting your evidence and then moving on to what they all are.
If you click here for spirals.
But the children helped
There.
me to see
Yeah,
that it
next one
wasn't
down.
2D,
This
it
one?
needed to be
Yeah.
moving in space.
Oh gosh, I remember this from
Yeah, do you
years
remember
ago.
years ago? Yeah.
From the university.
Yeah, you have to open it. I don't know why the spirals wouldn't open by itself.
Okay.
Up there,
That's what I mean, obviously it's got nothing to do with it. I was thinking about the spiral curriculum, which was extremely famous in the 60s and then
Yeah, no, completely.
yeah.
which I used in my master's degree as well.
The reason we invited her to the Adlerian conference is the Adlerians we've introduced. Oh, that's not it.
I was looking for spirals.
No,
No,
that
it was the previous one.
Yeah.
There's a click for
No, well,
You have to go into researching together at the top.
that tab on the
No,
right.
researching together.
Yeah, yeah. Look,
Tab on the right. Go
okay, no, sorry.
up. Left, sorry, right.
Bell Wallace.
now, no, go to the bottom one. No,
No, not that one, not
keep
spiral.
looking.
No, this one.
No.
Oh,
You-
that is
you want
the
to know
paper.
what spiral is?
Okay, that's the
That is a
spiral.
paper.
This is
Go
this
back.
is the
No, it's not. Yeah.
this is just putting together what spiral
There.
offers for
Okay.
Adlerian.
Still.
Yes, going berserk. Right.
So wait a minute, we've moved from the task wheel to now,
Well, it's in South Girls in here.
so what's this?
Well,
Prison.
see, I found it very complicated, but the Adlerians, we had been for 2 years offering living theory, and there was a sort of resistance to it, because they said it was too academic and we're an open, we don't want this academic stuff.
Is this the living theory?
Yeah. And probably the way we presented it was something. We were too intense by half. No, exactly. And so when I saw the film of the 6-year-olds using Task, and that Joy had adapted it for adults as well, or it was offering, I suddenly thought, oh, well, we could do 2 favours here. One, Joy needed a boost on that she was producing something that was worthwhile, and the Adlerian, it was nice and novel and colourful for the Adlerians for the conference. And so this is how this is developed. So I created this paper adapting her spirals for Adlerians. In the process, it got really complicated because there's task, there's spirals is the title, and people say, what is it? And then within it, there's task, there's living theory task, there's what's the other one? There's something else as well. Too many things.
The spirals has got a number of sections, so it's a
Yeah.
living archive. So it's started in with the kids, but you can use it as an adult. So there's a Dear Me section, which you just a sort of thoughts, you get the creative ideas, you get that you don't want to lose. There's other sections where you can gather your thoughts. And then there's sections on projects, and then there's another section which is also reflection. So the section on the projects, where bringing you draw from the other sections, so what sort of project you want to do, for instance. So you can draw that in, and then you can go through a task-like process with what it is that you wanted to research at that time. So it's a way of holding all those things
It's like a
together.
toolbox.
Exactly. I called it a series of folders.
Yes,
Yeah.
and you can develop that in any way you suit.
You've then written the joint paper together in corporate.
Yes, in Gifted Education International. It came out this week.
But that's what you and Marie have done together, based
With
on
Joy.
with Joy,
So
based on what?
No, not based on mine.
No, it's not based on that.
No,
It's the same.
it brings together.
But Joyce is the commonality
Yeah.
between the two of you, which is the spirals,
That's
which is
right.
going from 2D to 3D.
Yeah.
And Sonia just said something about the children enabled the Joy to realise that it was dynamic, relations
Yes, that's right.
dynamic.
That's
and
right. Yeah, that's it. Shall we go around and come back?
So anyway, that's what
Yeah.
that's what
That's
that's
great.
Well,
William.
the kids got it, so
Yeah.
I reckon that's 6 hours to get it. And,
Yeah, and then we've just made it more and more complicated and less accessible.
it's one of those things that doing is easier
Explain.
than
Explaining.
explaining. So So,
Mm.
yeah.
So that page where I've put all those icons down, I've just said how that responds to me writing a paper. So my really heavy paper, it's pretty heavy, because I really want to do it well. It won't confuse it because nobody's going to read it, I expect. But I hope the diagram to show how I used it might be useful. That's my
I'll send round the proper URL, the one that
yeah.
Robyn said.
If you go down the page, if you scroll down the page, you'll see all the icons. They're not there. You scroll down the page, Marie, down that
You
page.
scroll down the page.
Down that page. Yeah, there.
Yes.
Yeah. So I've just shown.
That's good.
And then you can click on, so you get the task tool and you get the various things which are in the folders. Not a lot, just bits. The questionnaire I use, things like that.
Right.
Actually, it's still not clear, is it? I must make the icons bigger and the
I
text.
do like William Pooh. What's the do
Text goes through the arena.
Yeah, I'm going to play with it, but that's where it is at the moment.
So Prism is your own kind of skills that you develop.
Yeah, which is, you could write lots, but then you got a whole lot more.
Yeah,
words,
and
so
you can collect whatever you like. Other kids
yeah.
collected sort of things that they put in pockets.
We could come back to this and cry. No, it's just that we can go
Yeah,
round.
yeah.
Because we'll bring this into the meeting, Rachael. Go on, will you?
Well, first of all, I'm sorry I wasn't here last Friday. It was because we went to London on Thursday, and we did various things in London. But amongst the things we did was to go to 2 art shows. One in the Tate Modern, which was an artist called Dorothea Tanning, who's a surrealist, extraordinary woman. It's beyond words really what she did, which was all so weird and yet so compelling. A mixture of 2-dimensional paintings and 3-dimensional works, tortured, sexual, evocative of our struggle to come to terms with life, which is what you're showing there, really, isn't it? Only she did it all visually and in a very tactile sort of way. And most of the sculptures were stitched together by hand, and they were huge. Anyway, so that was her. And then we went to an even more extraordinary show at the Royal Academy, which was a combination of work by a guy called Bill Viola and Michelangelo. So they had a lot of Michelangelo drawings. This work by Bill Viola, which Bill Viola sees what he is doing through a sort of lens that's been made available to him by what Michelangelo did. And it's all about, I don't understand it enough to be able to explain, but the effect of some of the works was quite extraordinary. And there was one about birth and death, where and it was filmed, and nearly all his work is video. And he had a video of his mother dying. Which is an extraordinary thing to do in an art show. I don't know whether he had her permission or not, but
Too late now.
and on the other side of the same big screen was a lady giving birth to a baby, which was completely explicit. You saw the baby gradually emerging. And what people thought of that, I don't know. I've been present at so many births. To me, probably it had less impact than it did for some other people. But even so, to have that life, birth and death depicted on video, and it was huge, huge, huge. One of the big rooms in Royal Academy. It was just mind-blowing, really. There you go.
Yeah.
So that, my mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
suppose I've got three. I've had three a minute ago, but I think I've been listening to William and I've forgotten. First one was and I didn't know until this morning because we didn't listen to the news about what's happened in New Zealand. Yesterday I met one of our new volunteer counsellors, which means she's a sort of postgraduate, having to get her hours as being a counsellor. And she happens to be a Canadian Muslim, hijab-wearing Muslim. And so just started to get to know her. And I was saying to my husband last night, I don't understand how within about an hour of meeting somebody, I'm talking about terrorism and theories on why things go on. And the person is as gripped as I am in the conversation. When she left, she said, I've got to carry on these conversations. And I just thought, I can talk to somebody who's in their 20s and they don't think, God, silly old, you know. It was extraordinary. And what we were talking about was my theories, which actually kind of was about the whole issue around, you know, when like the woman, the 15-year-old went off to, the story of the 15-year-old who wants to come back and the baby's died. And I was saying that I just felt it wasn't any different to, my daughter got pregnant at 19, and I think I know what all that was about, and it was about wanting to be loved, it was wanting to, it wasn't about sex, that's for sure, and it was about a whole load of stuff around insecurity, wanting to be noticed, to be seen, and she was with, the person that she was with was like on the edge, it's that kind of looking for that sort of, excitement and somebody who's different and slightly kind of risky. And I didn't feel that what was happening for young Muslim girls was that who do they go to because they don't have those risky role models within their communities, and so where do they go? And it's like it's like looking at through a sort of outside the box really about. And I was also talking about my theories about comparing terrorism to the troubles in Northern Ireland, in Ireland, and the IRA and Protestants, and hearing Patrick McGee, who was the Brighton bomber who was released on the Good Friday Agreement and goes around the world with Joe Berry, whose father was killed, and they go to talk peace, and they go all over the world. And she came and did some work for me for Bath in Peace Day, and then we went out to see her with Patrick McGee in the Froome, huge police presence there. And I was saying how much I hated him. I hated him on sight, and it was like he was dead. There was a greyness about him. I can't explain what it was about him because he's a cold-blooded murderer. And the two things he said to me, which completely freaked me out, was he said that somebody said, were you brought up in Northern Ireland? He said, no, we came back from England as a late teenager. And then they said, and are you religious? I said, no, I was born Catholic, I never had any faith. And he was the IRA bomber. And I wanted to get off my chair and go and physically hurt him because I am a Catholic, my mother was an IRA sympathiser, I've been steeped in that history. And he was basically a thug, who had no care about it, he was looking for a cause. And yet, he did that, etc., etc. So that's all quite complicated, but, it's wrapped up, and I was saying that I think that those who, she was talking about the way the Quran is twisted, etc., etc. And I was just saying, well, isn't it that they're thugs looking for a cause, there's just a different way of, we need to start looking at this. So anyway, that's pretty huge really. But that was at the beginning, just meeting her, and I know we're going to have lots and lots, and I felt this excitement that maybe something might come from it, from that. The other one was Nigel Harrison. Finally saw my grandson 3 years after I'd requested it this week, and he's writing a big report on it, and I just feel a real sense of 3 years on. They told my daughter how expensive it was going to be to bring him in, but they decided it, they ignored me when they said, oh no, when I first suggested it. I've not been in touch with him because I thought it was unprofessional, so we're waiting for the report, but I just thought I'd say that 3 years on it's taken. He's now 9 and at risk of having to leave the school. But that's that, and I can't remember what the third one is, so I'll leave it there.
20. Catch up. You catch up. I'll just get this done.
Yeah, it's great. So my puzzle of the week was finally managing to get Skype contact with the Mongolians. So that was really lovely.
So they speak English?
Yes, they teach English. And doing doctorates, professional doctorates, so they're up to a dissertation sort of stage. So it's just really interesting trying to get because the Skype kept falling in and out, and English is much better than my Mongolian. But it's, you know, you have to really negotiate the language base. So that's, yeah, so trying to get a discussion going on.
This one of them.
Yeah, that was, yeah, I had that in my thesis.
You did.
Yeah, so anyway, that's
Interesting. So will they connect with us?
well,
Yes.
we're going to get them in on the, hopefully on the 13th. So,
Did we do a special program if there's a Skype?
no, it was, no,
You
it's
okay?
not.
It's one of those places a bit like New Zealand, where well, it seems like it's quite a common thing for people to feel a sort of fondness because it's a long way away, we don't know what it is, and it feels different.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is odd, isn't it? Because they must look on us as exotic.
Yeah.
My friends made an amazing video of their trip to Mongolia. And we went snowboarding there with some Mongolians. Just incredible scenery,
Yeah.
incredible people.
It's great, isn't it, to bring, you know,
We could
to
have
be
a
able to
view.
bring them in. You know, Marie's invites you to me. She's nudging everybody.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Brain like hell, but it's
Well,
good.
Just in mind, it's actually all linked to what's going on at Rachel's on it's 13th, isn't it, of April. The idea of bringing people like the Mongolians into the room, and also I mentioned it yesterday to Jackie DeLong in Canada, and we'll have several people that we can bring in, you know, through the video. But I'm just wondering, because of what William said, I don't know if you, this image of birth, yeah, and death, now, I think it's in Vietnam, that G. Canada Collins, the Buddhist priest, he would spend time, no, it was in Thailand, and he would be in the hospices in Thailand, and the families would do exactly what William said. They would actually video the death throes of their relatives, and this was part of their coming to terms with the death. Yeah? Now, if you take what William said,
Who did that?
this is just entirely, well, Jikan was there as a Buddhist priest, but he was assisting. But it was normal to do exactly
And the pleasure that they were sharing of being with somebody
as they were dying. Yeah?
It was leaving the space.
So, if William, and you may not wish to do this, but that idea of being the visual of birth, yeah, and then the visual of death, and this issue, what are we going to do in the meantime? You know, what are we going to do with the rest of our lives? It seems to me to be linked to that of Salvador Dali that was called the cabinet anthropomorphique. So you can't tell in terms of the sexuality and the sex. This is a cabinet that what Dali is saying, and this is why I don't really, I identify with it, but I can't go along with the message, okay, because I don't know if you all know this, but what he's doing is saying, look, the open drawers are the ones in the psyche that you have visited and faced. The closed ones are still closed to you. You're not willing to go there and actually come to terms with it. Now, for me, those open ones are full of hope and energy, which isn't carried by the sculptor. I went to see this. It's about 8 feet long, and it's a really superb sculpture. But sorry, go on.
I've never noticed the
I can't see corners, draws them.
at the bottom.
There's a pack of
Sexuality.
Is there,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've never noticed that.
all the,
All the drawers are open though.
No, there's
one
a bottom
about
one.
the-
That's
He
just
says
a
about-
lock. That's a lock, isn't it? Just one.
No, it's a locked drawer.
It's a locked drawer, yeah. That was what he was intending to communicate.
did you say it was a sculpture? No, it's not a sculpture.
It is, yeah. Yeah, it's really, it's a huge.
This is
That's
a
a painting.
picture
This is
a
painting.
of it, but
That-
he's also
that's
done a
right.
sculpture.
The original sculpture of it is just very, very powerful. But it's got several paintings of it and, you know, mini ones. But what I was wondering was that William, with that birth and death, and then this sense, well, in this room at the moment, I think, what are we doing with the rest of our lives? You know, what is it that gives us hope and pleasure? What?
I just thought I'm going to choir next.
Okay. Right, yeah, I see. No, there, yes. Anyway, that was my buzz.
Go on.
No, my buzz was, what are we going to bring into April the 13th that we can all share? And, like that issue of where you were talking about, there's so much going on in the world at the moment, which is really painful. Like, Robyn comes in this morning, I hadn't seen the news, so I didn't know 2 mosques in New Zealand had they been bombed or shot? A machine gun. Now this is the reality, and yet we're still, if you like, coming to terms with these
2
things.
blocks away from my grandchildren's school.
Right.
Yeah.
Really?
But they might have been in the
Oh.
centre of town because of some bits of news where in the cathedral square because they were doing the climate change thing and they were bound to have been there because their schools, walking distance. And so that was probably my brother.
So I mean, but the focus is on Islamophobia.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, was it the Prime Minister, because I only just heard it coming in first time, the Prime Minister said, more or less, that this shouldn't be happening here. And I was thinking, what sort of statement is that about the rest of the world? And this is about, presumably, white people.
Well, she's saying it shouldn't be happening anywhere,
Yeah.
and she's saying, she didn't say anywhere.
So,
Yeah.
The hate guns are not part of New
Yeah.
Zealand. So it's not
Well,
happening
you
here.
can't
It's not a gun
critique
culture.
Saint
yeah, can we
Saint
go, Rachel?
You can't understand it's not their perspective, not
It's just that
Yeah.
for April 13th, it's just for us to think very carefully about what it is we're doing now, that we're connecting in quite a different way than we were 2 years ago. And we can bring in, like Geisha Ribaldo, who's actually, she sent an email to Murray yesterday. Geisha is in Caracas. Now, if you can imagine what Caracas is like at the moment.
Exactly.
Yeah, she's had, right. So there's Geisha, who was a passionate inquirer as an academic and teacher researcher, but she's in the middle of all this. Venezuela, yeah. So there's Geisha. We might be able to get Geisha in, I'm not sure. But we've got this April the 13th where we've moved on over the past 2 years, incredibly. And it's trying to do what Robyn's done, which is, we've got our website, and I'll send you the URL. It's not the one that Robyn sent around, so I'll send the right one so you can click on it and get into it, yeah? But what Robyn's done is bring now different accounts, like the one that's being done next week with the Adlerian group at a conference. I still think that those images of yours, William, to really startle us, to say, look, birth, death, what are we doing now? Anyway, that's me. Hi.
It's your turn, Rachel.
No.
Sorry, I was just thinking, I've got to write it through. When that...
It's that that's depressing.
Right, I'll turn it off.
On the video, when you said so-and-so gone to sleep on when the Skype connection wasn't working for your research.
Oh, yeah. She was gone to sleep. Kaz.
And you couldn't get a Skype connection with her. And you said, she's gone to sleep. And there was this freeze frame that was all very funny. That's how I felt I was. I felt as if I was in a freeze frame of trying to process everything that's been said at the moment.
Can I just say about that picture, that you felt hope with the open drawers and not about the closed one. Because I'm thinking before that actually, that's where I don't want to go, that's how I've sorted it there, and I can get, I think it's
I thought there was the hope with the door at the end.
I think
Picture on the right.
I think the point of the closed drawers is that they're not sorted because you've never been into them and you're not prepared to go there.
No, it's not just that, that's a way of dealing with it, saying,
Yes.
no, I'm not going to let that bother me around. Actually, we've all got stuff that can be really devastating, and there's different ways of dealing with it. One way is to say, no, thank you very much. So I see you're very hopeful.
It's a gift or a can of worms.
I find it such an ugly image, actually.
It is. That's what I can't.
That's
you know,
why I don't.
It doesn't mean to be an ugly image. It
No.
couldn't be.
it
And
is.
very male, it had to have nipples.
Yeah.
I just, when I looked at it, I thought, oh shit, that doesn't do it for me.
I think it says a lot about Darwin.
Yeah.
Well, this one is ours, and this is Andy's.
Well, that's better.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is
right.
better, isn't it? So, the Living Theory Wiki Rachel's got the invitation to the 13th there, which is this. And we've got Andy's bowl as a cooperative endeavour. Anyway, I was hoping that we could all give some thought to what it is we would like to bring into that space, which is such a move on from where we were 2 years ago. And even that question, like, well, what are we doing with the rest of our lives? Here are the images, certainty in a birth. So I'm hoping everybody will just give that thought. Sonia, this morning, said, I'm just not sure what my original claim to knowledge is. Okay.
Or why it's original from
What
somebody
is it?
else's.
Yeah,
That's
and it's
very
no
similar.
knowledge, was it?
Yeah.
So it could be that by the 13th of April you've worked out something to do with that. Sorry, not Rachel.
No, carry on, because I was thinking about this, because going through that, I watched your video all the way
Yeah.
through with and it was the difference between unique and original, and that unique thing. And I got confused because I didn't understand that Jason was researching into loving kindness, because there was no evidence of loving kindness in the whole of I couldn't understand who that was related to. But what he then spoke to you, he said, I can't helped but be moved by the values that you bring to your presence in the moment with me and others listening to you that resonates care above the virtues of caring.
Is it that?
Jason, because he'd gone through talking about caring as a relational value, as a process, but then he also said that he didn't want that process, he didn't want it to be called a process. And I kind of got both of those, and what I came up with this morning was that there was the sense of everybody being there around in that, whether it's on the Skype, you're connected because you have something in common, which is you're all researching PhDs, and so that is the framework in which you're researching, part of that framework. We're here and we go, why are we here? There's that constant question that we're always asking ourselves. So in some ways, there's a sense of instability in here because that question hasn't been, we haven't taken that, or I haven't taken that next step to be clear, to articulate, although I'm clear for myself what I'm doing. But it was that sense of how do we move it. It was when we talk about the spirals and the children going from 2D to 3D, and it was relationally dynamic, but there's something happening about, for me it says that the values are the thing that does the moving. The values are the things that do the moving. So I was thinking when we're together, the value is, going back to why that image of Andy's is important for me, is because the values represent everybody together, which concurs with Andy's thing. But that forms what I've started to term a structural polyphony. You have the structure there of the hands, but then you've got many voices. And we all have different meanings, and what I was working on is that I have a different understanding of natural inclusion from Jack. But that doesn't mean to say that either are not valid, so you can have both together. But what I felt was really important to not have caring labelled as a process was the fact that it denies the intangible presence of the values, and that's the thing that shifts the thinking and the conversation. That's it.
Yeah, because that was my answer to Sonia today. That when you talk about the intangible presence
Of values.
of the values, because those are embodied in how Sonia, in fact, it's a video of Sonia with Rachael from a few years ago, where Sonia was expressing that intangible presence. So that feels to be really important. Are you okay with this in terms of thinking what you might like, Julie, with, I'll just show you because, oh, you've lost me, okay.
Why is it
I'm not sure what would play with that.
Right, okay.
Sort of lost
Haven't
the
seen the
plot
video, don't know.
Right. Shall we move on then? No, really.
there. Can we go?
Okay, one more go. Right.
What was the video you were going to show me?
Maybe the difference between unique and original.
If you like, I
Right
mean,
the way down, 'cause that's
if you
where it
like, I mean,
starts.
we're all unique. If you look around this room, we're all unique. There can be no denying, can there, that we're all different, yes? So we're all unique. Now, I'm claiming that everybody here, because of your life and the reflections and what you're doing, have got the possibility of bringing into a public form of communication the nature of the knowledge that you have generated through a lifetime of reflection and action. And that embodied knowledge for me is very important to share. Now, the originality in each person is as you bring your knowledge and share it with others, you've all got what we can call, it is a unique constellation of values, but in making it public as knowledge, you're making an original contribution to knowledge. That you're all living, you're all unique, your constellation of values is unique. But what we haven't done, well, we've partially done it,
Why does it become original just because you make it public?
Yeah.
because the knowledge itself is being placed within a particular paradigm of individuals generating their own explanations of their educational influences in their
Becomes
own
available to others.
Yes,
So why is,
That
why is
paradigm
that
is-
why is that original and still not unique?
right, because
Because it's original within knowledge.
this will sound awful.
World
All
knowledge.
right. This won't satisfy you, I'm sure. But if I place myself as one of the world experts in this field, if you just take that for the moment,
Yeah.
In the field
of living theory
Correct.
research,
So we have to
We
accept
understand
living
that.
theory as a field.
as a field, or
That's
So
the-
We
now what you
understand that, but
Right.
that doesn't mean that we should take your word just 'cause
no,
you're an
it doesn't,
expert.
and that's the problem because when it all comes down to these original contributions, like in a doctorate, all it means is that two people have said yes, this is an original contribution, and it's just literally a professional and academic judgment of people that are recognised in the field. Now, it might not satisfy you, but that's the truth. So if I say this is an original contribution to educational theory,
It's been validated by
Ex-
academia.
exactly that's it. And if you like, I can demonstrate how. If you like, I can. That's the counsellor with William. If we can get William to actually bring into the public domain William's unique constellation of values and insights, like he just did today, make that public. And partially William has done this, but to look at it is the okay. Go on.
Oh, no, I understand what you're saying, but I think that what is going to make two people agree that it's valid then?
Well, that's the bit that makes it academia, is that it needs to pass through a system, so it loses a lot of the uniqueness, all the extra bits which are unknowable by anybody else, and I'm calling them private logic because they're not even, it's bizarre, some of our stuff we know and act on, that's not my kind of stuff. But the original bit, there's enough of it there that's recognisable.
There's enough shared stuff.
Yeah, it's recognisable
Yeah.
as authentically you, that's one thing, but also it has relatability to enough people to make it worth sharing. How about that?
And isn't that where the
Yeah,
Habermas
usable.
thing is the extra level,
Relatable,
the extra
because I
level
can
of
relate
checking
to it.
this.
I understand
Do
it.
I do
Oh,
my
it was true for me.
comprehensibility?
But that's
That's right.
right, because I can use it.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
feels to me like a game.
Well, it
Well,
is.
it is a game.
No, Jack, you've got to reduce it just to a political game. Yes, to get it actually a doctorate, that's one thing. But actually, there's something more important than that. This is an original contribution to knowledge in the form that it actually makes a difference. Now that, for me, makes it
What
worthwhile.
makes a difference?
The final bit of getting it validated by the university is, you're right, it's just a political game. But that's to demean actually the quality of the doctorate, if you like, because
Yeah.
there is something more important than just two people that you manage to persuade that.
So the
yeah,
actual
that's-
importance, the importance of it has been validated in the field, and therefore getting it through the university is, whilst it may appear to be a tick box, it isn't, because it is the final thing that means that there has.
Yes,
that it
yeah,
does-
that's because it's been through
It has
other
to be,
because it's been
validations.
through other validations.
Absolutely, that's
That
exactly what I was
and
going to
that's
say.
why I'm not struggling, but I'm hesitant, because I feel at the moment, and this is not to say in the future it will change, that my resistance to commit to the academic process is because at the moment, I feel that my gathering of data is more important to be gathered from within the field, from within the community, before I then make that next stage. And I have to be really confident in my, I have to have all that resilience, all that da-da-da-da, before I go through the academic process. But I'm not belittling the academic process. I'm slightly in awe of it and thinking, okay, well, I need to check out what it is. And there was something that was getting to me, because this justifying my value of living loving kindness is the unique constellation of values. And what was concerning me was that I hadn't got time to do it in time for June, to do that time. But the value that's coming up today that seemed, for me, that seems to be appropriate for me to work with in the context of the conversation that we've had is remembrance. Because when you talk about birth and death and all those things, and about restoring, and the dialogic process it's about something is, what did I have to look up? That Jackie DeLong keeps saying, that we're constantly having to re-describe things. Now, there's a difference between re-describing and restoring. And in remembrance, there is something about a raw truth that comes up. So when you're talking about those images at the art gallery, you have been borne witness to both of those events of birth and death, probably more so than anybody else in this room, in the natural process of things. When you then add in what Sheilah's talking about terrorism, and there isn't the terrorism, the words that were coming out for me, is this a thug that's looking for a cause? There's something about all of that that means that we need to do something differently, and why this spirals is possibly important. I haven't managed to look, because there is a distinction about adapting it for adults, because by the time we get to adults, we've got a body of knowledge of which we can remember from, but remembering isn't the same as remembrance. And so what I noticed in collecting my data, that I was resonating back with, and I don't understand, but I'll call it discomfort that you had last year, that when you're doing the next analysis of the analysis sort of thing, you can be in danger of re-traumatising yourself by going back into that. And that's exactly what I have come to this week in collecting. I've been doing a lot of gathering and organising data, and I've gone back. And one of the things that William once said to me was that it's as if we have a box that we've, do you remember talking this story about in the conversation we had with Alan? He said it's as if there's a box of treasures that we put in our lives, which then relates to the locked drawer. Now, do you see that as a drawer of treasures, or is it a drawer of skeletons? You know, people say there's a skeleton in the trunk. Now, I then thought I had this, not fury and anger. It wasn't a fury. It wasn't an anger, but it was something that moved me in your description to talk about this box, because I thought I need to go to that box. So I've gathered those boxes, and I need to undo them to take out the gifts and gently put aside the skeletons, which is that process of birthing and deathing of my experience, which is what I think I've learned from the process that you've gone through, and why I believe that this mutuality is that thing that you want. You do claim that it is, and what I was worrying about, or not worrying but pondering with, is that, Jack, you say that, you know, I can't say that I give people meaning and purpose, and you're willing to claim that I give them meaning and purpose. Now, that's in a big generalisation thing, but maybe living theory is that powerful. Maybe it is. And maybe if there was that generation of, you know, in the future, of people who have gone through this process, that it can give people more, it has the potential to give people more meaning and purpose so that there are less thugs looking for a cause.
Yeah, no, I really like that. It's not, if you like, I give you meaning and purpose.
No,
I
you
can't do that.
personally
that.
don't,
There's something about each
but
person.
mutuality might do.
No,
But there's
it-
something
it,
about-
it gives an environment where it is possible.
It is, it's that.
Yes.
Makes it okay.
So
There's
that-
something about what goes on in here that I find very attractive, because I keep coming, I wouldn't keep coming otherwise. And I find that academia I have severe reservations about, the institution of academia. That it is at once extraordinarily valuable because of the discovery of knowledge which is really useful. On the other hand, it can also, at the same time, be a way of creating a hierarchical monument,
A bit like religion.
a bit like religion. And this is about what humans do. And it is at once this ghastly thing, which is kind of collecting power to itself. And this wonderful thing that liberates, because knowledge is so important to humans. You know, we all need to know stuff in order to survive. And I find myself constantly struggling with that interface, that I hate academia and I love academia, simultaneously.
Does it help to make a distinction between what is academic and academia as a place in which you have it? So for me, the reason to do the doctorate was one, it helped me to keep a focus on what was important, while everything else was part, because I just then thought I'd be doing that next year rather than today. But the other thing was to actually test. Yes, you need to be able to test what it was that was saying. So if it's for me, the purpose of academic is to make the reasonable well-reasoned. The academic is about actually testing the reasonableness rather than whether it is reasonable. If it's reasonable, that's where my values come in, and I'm living them.
It's with relatability.
But there's a reason, there's actually that logic.
Yeah.
And for me, that was very important. And it's also to test the scholarship. For me, the purpose of the scholarship is that have I actually sort of think about other people's ideas? No one's on their own. Even Newton, although he said it in the parody to have a go at book, he stood on the shoulders of giants. So rather than just being in my own little hole, saying my own little thing, surely if we're going to contribute to the flourishing of humanity, I need to actually be in touch with other people's humanity and other people's knowledge. So for me, the reason to do the doctorate had those complex, but it's a distinction between getting a doctorate as an academic, simply as a procedure, as a political procedure. But within it, it's something else you've said, literally, that for a couple of hours, you've got two people actually focusing on what it is that you're saying. And really, it's a form of validation. It's not just saying, does this communicate, but the rigour of the reasoning within it. Does that hold?
You can only have rigorous reasoning if you have a framework, agreed framework, the rules of the game by which you're
No, it's
prepared
not
to
about.
play.
It's actually the
Well, I think
living
that's big and
logic.
stuff,
Living
yeah.
logic is a different thing. It's actually to say, is my living logic.
It's not
the
as
log-
solid as that.
If the logic that I have actually showing you, does that actually make sense? Can you understand the logic? And this is the frame. For them to understand that, I have to put it in the frame, which comes to what you've been going on for years about rather than Aristotelian logic, rather than Socratic, then there's actually a living form of logic that actually they, from what I can gather, is better known in the East because everything, I reckon the Chinese started everything. But that notion of it's not just either this or either that, they're all contradictions, it's not holding those together. There's a living form of logic, and it's that logic that through that process of actually having 2 hours of people who really want to see if they can understand.
So if you can
So
get it
I can
validated
interrupt.
by
No,
people
no.
who are not living theorists,
Yeah,
Yes.
then that says a lot
it does.
Yes.
for what you've created.
Ariana Briganti.
And that's what
Yeah.
that's what I'm really thrilled
The-
about. That mine went through two
It did, yeah.
examiners who were not living
Yes.
theorists, and they asked questions of it, which then I managed to satisfy them. Well, it took me a while. They did have to ask again and again.
You got
It was
it.
very
You got it.
patient of them, but we did get
Yeah.
there.
Well,
And
that's
so I think that's what that yeah.
Look on, Rach.
I'm just going back to William's point about the love-hate relationship with academia, and this is a dull question that I'm asking a real vulnerability here, because you talked about it being a game, and you say, no, it's not a game, and I get that.
Part of it is.
Right, and I've been wondering about the process of it. When it becomes a process, then it can become a ritual. And when I say a ritual, there are certain, and this is what I'm asking for clarification on, there are certain criteria that need to be met. And living theory has the added, the Habermas criteria and everything. So you've got that as an added thing that makes living theory doctorates different from other doctorates, and therefore, but it's that thing, can I see it as a ritual? Because that, for me, that means there's a sort of structural process.
There are the politics of getting the doctorate awarded, but there's also, and I'm not denying that, so to have examiners who are hostile, it's no use to marry lobbies. You actually want people who are actually at least sympathetic, so that they're prepared to listen to what you say. But what you need to say is about the units of appraisal and living standards of judgment.
Yeah.
That
And if
was
you can
not-
state that, if you can
Yes.
state that process, that logic really clearly, they can't fail you.
Well,
In 1 minute.
well, yeah. No,
Is that
yeah.
the units
Yes.
of appraisal?
Yeah, and the standards of judgment.
You mean they
Yeah.
gain that living
Yeah,
the
but
living
I'm going to
theory,
say,
yeah.
There's
no,
a- there's
remember
good
that,
paper
yeah.
living.
No, I want to hear what you have to say.
Read
No, it's just that I failed, my first
yeah,
two
okay, you did it,
doctorates,
yeah,
right,
you
were
failed, yeah.
with 6 examiners,
You
right?
pissed off people.
The
that's
really
why.
international and national experts in
Yeah.
educational research, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the first one, they asked me, is there anything that you'd like to take up now? And I said, yes, I'd like you to examine my thesis in its own terms. And it really shocked them, because they clearly hadn't. So I was faced with a political reality. Now,
Yeah.
in one sense, I didn't mind them failing me. What I objected to was the fact that the university said, under no circumstances can you challenge the judgments they've made once they have been appointed by Senate. So before, they could go into my drunk as lords,
Which is what you're
and
saying.
I couldn't challenge it. Yeah? Now the third one, it opened with 3 examiners, again, international experts, and they just said to me, Jack, you've got your doctorate, now let's just have an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
And that was John Elliott, and a professor from Exeter and non-internal. The difference between the politics, now it's like with Ariana Briganti. Ariana is going to be the next one to be examined. Now she is negotiating to get an expert, an international expert in international development, because her thesis is a living theory of international development. Now she needs both, and that's what she's argued with Cumbria, and I've written to them to say I don't know, I'm very competent to judge this at Lancaster University or Cumbria, right? Now actually they've agreed, the department have agreed, so they will appoint 2 external examiners, experts in the field.
At a cost.
Yes, well, to them.
Yes.
Sorry, but there are 2 things. One is the politics of that process. The other is what you're now talking about, which is the lead up to the production of the doctorate, where you actually subject it to all of these criteria of validity. And can I just mention this, because we're going to have to pack in, but can I just point
Still
out
look
this?
at that.
Yeah, it's that point. Can I just point to this, that if you go into this, right, I'll send you the URL, but it's just that if you click on Shelagh, yeah. Now, actually, no, there's nothing there. But there's a page that comes up, and it's just by chance. It's got at the top creating Shelagh. Right now, I didn't have anything to do with it. This is just the technology. Oops, yeah, creating Shelagh. Now this comes for everybody.
Yes.
Yeah, it's what. So you've got a page here where.
Got a hot chance to create it.
But it just
So when
fits.
you then put something, what does it then move to?
You're creative.
That's right. You are. If you go to
Give mine to Blackie.
Jo.
Oh, so
It's created.
you've moved from
You can
creating.
change it.
Can you go to mine and just see,
Yeah.
does it have the picture?
Could you go, there's Sonia?
You can do whatever you want on
Yeah,
your-
but I put a picture on it, it won't come up in the public one.
Okay.
You do.
So is that your abstract?
It comes up when I look at it, but does it come up when I
No,
look at
because
it
it's
in
in
the
edit
public?
mode. You need to make sure that you've saved it.
You're a rebel, aren't you, Jess?
A
So
rebel?
you,
Yeah, here's the title.
you are at once a kind of monument of determination to do your own thing, and part of a system that you live with a certain amount of friction at the edges.
Yeah, no,
Which is a nice design, I quite like. I mean, that's quite attractive.
Yeah.
It's the rebellious.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you
Well,
recognise
the best
one,
you
don't
can
you?
do that.
That's what you do.
Yeah.
You worked within the structures of
The NHS.
an NHS, of a surgery, of what is established as medical practice. But you were still continually trying to take the field forward. Well, I don't think you were rebelling against it. Surely you didn't just want to stop something, you wanted to actually contribute something that took it forward.
Only in my terms, not theirs.
But in, no, switched that. Actually, what the terms are,
Just established that that's
is as I understand, medicine's about trying at least to do no harm. So you're actually trying to take a field forward.
I think you need to.
What they've been doing all those years
Oh, yeah.
might actually be doing for harm, but you're saying, well, if you do it this way, you don't have a rebel.
Yeah.
That's not just being a rebel, you're not just trying to.
I think
look
I
down
was
what you're
thinking
trying to do, surely is to
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
live values.
To me, it's always been important to be a rebel within a system.
I mean, I do my own
Being a rebel
thing.
outside the system is not attractive because
You don't do your
Oh,
own.
obviously,
You
that's
do
great.
what you see, you believe you take all the
But also, I just feel like it's accurate. You can't take something anywhere and just develop it outside of
Everybody always
So if you want to change things,
a lot of people
really changing.
that I came up
You know,
against
having gone back to
was
school,
celebrating the status quo,
I don't think I
had no notion that it had any reason at all. We're just absolutely rigid.
But you think about where they're coming from, that they spent all this time trying to do their little level best for everybody. There's also something to be protected in here. You know better than I do as an employee. So it's
The one you just mentioned.
Yeah, it's not on there yet because it will be, but it's actually, I think, probably not, if you can look at it,
It's about
it's not difficult to
any
read.